You can't afford a decent dress for my wedding, let alone the bridesmaid fee, my sister Rebecca sneered across the table, her diamond engagement ring catching the light as she gestured dismissively at my outfit. I need everything to be perfect. And honestly, Alex, your whole tech startup fantasy isn't exactly paying the bills. I sat there, biting my tongue, knowing the truth that in just 3 weeks, my fantasy would be valued at $12 million in our first major funding round. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The overpriced restaurant Rebecca had chosen for our sister lunch buzzed with Boston's financial elite. Glass and chrome surrounded us, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the harbor where sleek boats cut through the water. Perfect setting for her to remind me of our different stations in life. I've decided to go with Megan as my maid of honor instead, Rebecca continued, cutting into her $60 steak. She can actually afford the bachelorette weekend in the Hamptons, and her boyfriend's family knows people. Important people. She emphasized the last words while eyeing my simple blazer. 3 years old, but still the nicest thing I owned. At least, the nicest thing I let my family see me own. My name is Alexandria Chen, 32 years old, and for the past 4 years, I've been building MedConnect, a healthcare logistics platform that revolutionizes how rural hospitals manage medical supply chains. My modest apartment, secondhand furniture, and lack of vacations weren't signs of failure. They were calculated sacrifices while I poured everything into my company. But try explaining that to the Chen family success manual. Prestigious degrees, corporate ladder, country club memberships, and marriage to someone with prospects. My father, a surgical department head, and my mother, a corporate attorney, had written that playbook. Rebecca followed it perfectly. Harvard Business School, engagement to a hedge fund manager, and constant reminders of her accomplishments. Alex? Are you listening? Rebecca's perfectly manicured fingers snapped in front of my face. I said you can still be a bridesmaid if you want, just not part of the main wedding party photos. Timothy's family is very image conscious, and they'll be investing in our future. The words stung more than I wanted to admit. Growing up as the Chen family, disappointment had calloused over some emotions, but Rebecca had always known exactly where to slide the knife. I glanced at my phone, which had been buzzing with notifications. My co-founder Zara messaging about our investor meeting preparations. The Series A funding was practically guaranteed, but I kept quiet. I'd learned long ago that sharing my ambitions with my family only invited doubt and criticism. That's fine, I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. Whatever works best for your perfect day. Rebecca smiled, satisfied with my submission. Great. Mom and Dad agree it's for the best. You know, Timothy's sister works in tech recruiting. Maybe she can help you find a real job with benefits after the wedding. Something stable. I nodded absently, thinking about the team of 26 people who now depended on me for their livelihoods. About the 5 rural hospitals in Appalachia already using our beta system, reporting 40% improvements in critical supply availability. About the venture capitalists who had been courting us for months. So I'll need your meal choice and a check for $300 for the bridesmaid dress by next week, Rebecca continued. The dress isn't exactly forgiving, so you might want to hit the gym before the fitting. She eyed my figure critically. The extra 15 pounds I'd gained during our last product sprint had been worth every late-night coding session and skip meal debugging marathon. I remembered all the family gatherings where my choices were questioned. Last Christmas, my father had cornered me in the kitchen. Healthcare logistics? Sounds like warehouse management. That Northwestern MBA was wasted on you. My mother had added, Startups are for young men who can afford to fail, Alexandra. You're not getting any younger. Only my grandmother Lee had ever believed in me. Before she passed 2 years ago, she'd pressed a jade pendant into my palm. Your path is different, she'd whispered in Mandarin. But your determination is strong. Don't let anyone dim your light. The pendant now hung around my neck, hidden beneath my collar. A private reminder. Earth to Alex? Rebecca waved her hand in front of my face again. Honestly, it's like you're always somewhere else. This is why Timothy's friends at Morgan Stanley would never hire you. No presents. I took a deep breath. Sorry, just thinking about work. Rebecca rolled her eyes. That little app thing? Alex, it's been 4 years. Even Dad's patience is wearing thin. He mentioned setting you up with Dr. Winters' son. He's an anesthesiologist now. 36, divorced, but no kids. Not the most exciting, but he'd be stable for you. My phone buzzed again. A text from Zara. Forbes confirmed the interview. They want photos at the office next Tuesday. I pocketed my phone and forced a smile. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. Rebecca sighed dramatically. Biological. Clock and all that. Not everyone can marry into Timothy's circle. Some of us have to be practical. She signaled for the check, then added it to my apparent list of shortcomings. And I'll get this. I know things are tight for you. As we walked out, Rebecca spotted a college friend and immediately transformed. Animated, charming, the perfect bride-to-be. She air-kissed the woman's cheeks. Jessica, you look amazing. Yes, the wedding plans are coming together beautifully. Of course, Timothy's family's estate is hosting the reception. I stood awkwardly to the side, suddenly invisible again. The familiar feeling settled in my chest, the peculiar ache of being seen as less than you are, of having your dreams systematically dismantled by the people who should support them most. Rebecca finished her conversation, checked her Cartier watch, and turned to me. I've got to run to my dress fitting. Remember, $300 and your meal choice by next week. And Alex? Her voice softened slightly, taking on the patronizing tone I knew too well. I'm just looking out for you. This startup phase was cute for a while, but it's time to join the real world. Even Dad says so. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. 3 more weeks. Just 3 more weeks and everything would change. Let them think I was a failure. For now. Their assumptions were about to crash spectacularly against the reality I'd built in silence. As Rebecca climbed into her BMW, I began the walk to the T-station, pulling up the investor presentation on my phone. Our valuation models were conservative. At $12 million, some analysts suggested we could push for $15 million. But I wasn't built on assumptions like my sister. I was built on results. The jade pendant felt warm against my skin. Different path, I whispered to myself, echoing my grandmother's words as I descended into the subway. By the time Rebecca's perfect wedding arrived, the entire Chen family would see just how different and successful that path had become. The family dinner that Sunday at my parents' Beacon Hill brownstone felt like walking into a carefully choreographed play where everyone knew their roles, everyone except me. Mom had prepared her famous duck confit, which meant someone important was joining us. That someone turned out to be Timothy, Rebecca's fiancé, and his parents, the Blackwells. Alexandria, you remember the Blackwells, my mother said with a tight smile that meant behave. Her pearl necklace caught the light from the antique chandelier as she gestured toward the impeccably dressed couple. Of course, I replied, offering my hand to Mrs. Blackwell, whose grip was as limp as her smile. Her husband merely nodded in my direction, his attention already returning to my father's discussion about hospital board politics. Timothy's father ran an investment firm that managed several billion in assets, the kind of connection my parents had always dreamed of for their daughters. Rebecca had delivered. I had disappointed. Alexandria works in technology, my mother offered vaguely. When Mrs. Blackwell inquired about my career, the way she said technology made it sound like I fixed printers at a local library. Fascinating, Mrs. Blackwell replied with precisely zero fascination. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And what company are you with? I actually founded my own startup, I began. Alexandra was always the creative one, my father interrupted smoothly. Rebecca followed a more traditional path. Top of her class at Harvard Business School. I fell silent, the familiar script playing out. Rebecca beamed from across the table, her hand resting on Timothy's arm. Her engagement ring, a family heirloom diamond reset in platinum, caught the light with every gesture. Alex made an app, Rebecca explained with practiced condescension. Something about hospital supplies. It's actually a comprehensive logistics. A platform that, I started. Let's not bore everyone with technical details, my mother cut in, passing the roasted vegetables. Timothy, Rebecca mentioned you've finalized the guest list? 300, was it? As the conversation shifted to wedding plans, I felt myself fading into the background. The expensive wine flowed freely, but each sip tasted bitter to me. 4 years of 18-hour days, of solving complex problems, of building something that actually mattered, reduced to Alex made an app. We've reserved the entire east wing of the Chatham Bars Inn, Rebecca announced. The rehearsal dinner will be on the beach, weather permitting. The Vandermeers are lending us their yacht for the welcome cruise. How lovely, my mother cooed, while my father nodded approvingly. Alex, Timothy's father, suddenly addressed me. Rebecca mentioned you need a real job. What's your background? The table fell silent. 6 pairs of eyes fixed on me, evaluating. I have an MBA from Northwestern, I replied evenly. Before founding MedConnect, I was a senior consultant at Deloitte focusing on healthcare systems. Mr. Blackwell nodded. Solid enough. I could put in a word at Blackwell Strategies. We have an associate position open in our operations division. Entry level, of course, but it's a foot in the door. Real business experience. My father perked up immediately. That's very generous, William. Alexandra would be grateful for the opportunity. I felt my chest tighten. Actually, I'm fully committed to my company. We're closing our Series A funding next month. The silence that followed was deafening. My father cleared his throat. Alexandra, let's not waste Mr. Blackwell's time. Your little project has been educational, I'm sure, but it's time to think practically. It's not a project, Dad. We have actual customers, revenue, and— Darling, my mother interrupted, her voice sharp despite her smile. This isn't the place. Rebecca looked between us, clearly enjoying the tension. Alex has always been stubborn about her hobby. But don't worry, she'll still make it to all the wedding events. I've already told her about the bridesmaid fees. Speaking of which, she continued, turning to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Have you sorted out your dress payment yet? The deadline is Friday. I'll handle it, I said quietly, knowing that arguing would only make things worse. Mr. Blackwell looked at me with something between pity and dismissal. The tech startup phase is common for your generation. When you're ready for stability, the offer stands. For Rebecca's family. The implication was clear. I wasn't being evaluated on my merits, but offered charity as an extension of my sister's successful match. As dinner concluded, I helped clear the plates while Rebecca and Timothy showed wedding venue photos to the Blackwells in the living room. My mother cornered me in the kitchen, her voice low but intense. What were you thinking, turning down William's offer like that? Do you know how hard your father worked to position this opportunity? I placed the dishes in the sink with measured control. Mom, I've built something valuable. In a few weeks, it'll be the same story we've heard for 4 years, she sighed. Alex, be realistic. Men like Timothy don't come along every day. The Blackwells are connected to everyone who matters in Boston. Your sister understood this opportunity. Why can't you? Because I'm not interested in marrying into success. I'm creating my own. My mother's laugh was both genuine and dismissive. Creating success requires capital, connections, and credibility. Things your father and I gave you both through the best schools money could buy. Rebecca leveraged that education. You're squandering it on this fantasy. The word fantasy stung, echoing Rebecca's dismissal at lunch days earlier. The Winters. Boy is still interested, she added, lowering her voice further. 36, established practice, divorced, but no baggage. Not as prestigious as the Blackwells, but he could provide stability while you figure things out. I don't need to be provided for, I said through clenched teeth. Everyone needs security, Alexandra. Even you. She patted my cheek like I was still 12. This wedding is an opportunity for you, too. Many of Timothy's friends will be there. Wear something flattering. Make an effort with your appearance. You never know. As I drove back to my apartment that night, their voices echoed in my head. 4 years of doubt, dismissal, and thinly veiled disappointment. 4 years of, when will you get a real job, and it's time to be practical. Little did they know that in less than 3 weeks, MedConnect would announce its $12 million valuation, features in Forbes and TechCrunch, and contracts with 3 major hospital networks. The fantasy they so easily dismissed was about to become very, very real. But for now, I kept silent. Sometimes the most powerful statement is the one you don't make until the perfect moment. The MedConnect offices occupied the 3rd floor of a renovated textile factory in Somerville. Not the gleaming downtown high-rise my parents would expect, but perfect for our needs. Open layout, affordable rent, and close to the talent pool from MIT and Harvard. As I badged in at 6:30 a.m. that Monday, the quiet hum of the server room greeted me before any of my team arrived. This was my real world, not the gilded cage my family tried to stuff me into. I settled at my desk, decorated only with my laptop, a small plant, and a framed photo of Grandma Lee. No Ivy League diplomas. On display, though, I had them. No family photos. The separation felt necessary for my sanity. "You're early even by your standards," Zara called as she walked in, balancing 2 coffee cups and her ever-present tablet. My co-founder had been the first person to truly see the potential in MedConnect when we met at a healthcare innovation hackathon 4 years ago. She handed me a cup, black, 2 sugars, and perched on the edge of my desk. "Family dinner last night," I explained, which was all the explanation Zara needed. "Ah, the Chen family experience. How many marriage proposals and job offers this time?" Her British accent made everything sound wittier, even the painful truth. Just one of each. Progress, I suppose. Zara's laugh echoed in the still empty office. With her biomedical engineering PhD and infectious energy, she could have worked anywhere. Instead, she'd bet her career on our vision of transforming rural healthcare supply chains. Unlike my family, Zara saw beyond credentials and connections to the actual impact of our work. "Well, in exactly 16 days, you'll never have to hear their doubts again," she said, pulling up our investor presentation. "Morgan wants one more review before the final pitch on Thursday." Morgan Hayes was our lead investor, a venture capitalist who'd made her fortune in healthcare tech. Her backing had kept us afloat when everyone else said no. She alone had seen what Rebecca, my parents, and the Blackwells couldn't. That MedConnect wasn't just another app, but a lifeline for underserved hospitals. I sipped my coffee and clicked through the slides showing our growth metrics. 5 rural hospitals now, 3 more launching next month, 40% improvement in critical supply availability, 28% reduction in emergency transfers due to supply shortages. Real numbers, real lives improved. "Did you pay the bridesmaid fee?" Zara asked suddenly. I groaned. "Not yet. It's due Friday." "Just pay it. Write it off as the last emotional tax you'll ever pay to your family's expectations." Zara knew everything about Rebecca's wedding, my demotion from maid of honor, the family dynamics. She'd been my soundboard through 4 years of dismissal. "It's not about the money," I said. "Of course it's about the money. Zara countered. It's about them thinking you don't have any. It's about them thinking success only looks like Rebecca's life. She wasn't wrong. The $300 meant nothing compared to our impending valuation, but it represented everything about how my family saw me. Struggling, impractical, in need of rescue. After the funding announcement, they'll know the truth, I said. And what exactly is the truth, Alex? Zara's tone shifted to something more serious. That you've built a company valued at $12 million? Or that you've been deliberately hiding your success from them for 4 years? The question stung because it hit at something I didn't like to examine. Why had I kept my progress secret for so long? At first, it was self-preservation. Their skepticism hurt less if I didn't share milestones they'd only dismiss. But now, on the verge of undeniable success, was there something else keeping me silent? They never asked, I said finally. Not really. They asked when I'd get a real job or when I'd move on from this phase. But they never actually asked about what I was building. And if they had? I didn't have an answer for that. The wall between my family life and professional life had grown so thick, I couldn't imagine their genuine interest in crossing it. Our conversation paused as the office began filling with our team, engineers with coffee mugs and bedhead, our operations manager planning hospital site visits, the new UX designer we'd hired last month. 26 people now depended on MedConnect for their livelihoods. 26 people who believed in what my family dismissed. Ryan called from Memorial Hospital in West Virginia, our operations lead said, stopping by my desk. Their emergency C-section kit arrived within 2 hours of ordering. Previous supplier took 2 days minimum. He says they saved a mother and baby yesterday because of it. I felt the familiar warmth that came with these reports. The real reason I'd built MedConnect. Not for valuation or vindication, but for moments. Like these when our work literally saved lives. My phone buzzed. Rebecca. Still waiting on your dress payment and meal choice. Deadline's Friday. Also, Timothy's friend Andrew might be seated at your table. Divorced. VP at Merrill Lynch. Thought you might want to wear something nicer than usual. I put the phone away without responding. The contrast between my two worlds couldn't have been starker. One focused on saving lives, the other on saving appearances. By midday, we were deep in preparation for Thursday's investor meeting. Our CTO walked us through the platform upgrades rolling out next quarter, AI-driven inventory prediction based on weather patterns, demographic health trends, and historical usage data. Our CFO presented the latest financials. We were approaching break-even 6 months ahead of projections. This was what I'd sacrificed for. What I'd endured family dinners for. What? The journey that led me to MedConnect began 5 years ago, though my family remembers it differently, as the moment I threw away my consulting career. I never told them the full story. Some truths feel too personal to share with people determined to misunderstand you. It was during my 3rd year at Deloitte, consulting for a prestigious Boston hospital. I was pulling 80-hour weeks, climbing the corporate ladder exactly as my parents had planned. On paper, I was succeeding. Good salary, respectable business card, invitations to the right networking events. The Chen family success template, followed to perfection. Then came the midnight call that changed everything. Alex, it's Michael. Grandma Lee is in the hospital. My cousin Michael lived in the same small Pennsylvania town as my grandmother, who had raised me for several years while my parents established their careers. I was on the next flight out, landing at the tiny regional airport at dawn, then driving an hour to the rural community hospital. The facility was clearly struggling. Outdated, equipment, overworked staff, and a waiting room full of patients from 3 counties. When I finally found my grandmother, she was in a hallway bed because all rooms were full. Alexandria. She smiled weakly, reaching for my hand. You didn't need to come, but I did need to. Grandma Lee had been the only person who ever truly saw me Not as an achievement, not as a disappointment, but as myself. While my parents pushed prestigious schools and career paths, she asked what made me happy. While Rebecca competed for attention, Grandma Lee listened. The doctor eventually explained they were waiting for a specialized cardiac medication. Supply chain issues, he said apologetically. Rural hospitals are last on distributors' priority lists. We've been waiting 18 hours, for medicine that any Boston hospital would have had immediately. I spent that night making calls, pulling every connection from my consulting work. By morning, I'd secured the medication through a former client. My grandmother stabilized, but the experience haunted me. During the 3 days I stayed with her, I interviewed hospital staff about their supply challenges. The patterns were clear: life-saving equipment and medications routinely delayed, emergency transfers to distant facilities. Because smaller hospitals couldn't stock specialized items, healthcare inequality literally costing lives. "You're thinking very hard," Grandma Lee observed from her hospital bed on the 3rd day. "I know that look." "The system is broken," I told her. "These hospitals can't get what they need when they need it." "So? What will you do about it?" She asked the question simply, as if the answer were obvious. I returned to Boston with a decision my family still doesn't understand. I resigned from Deloitte the following week and cashed out my 401k to fund initial research. My parents were horrified. "You're walking away from Partner Track for what? To build an app?" my father had demanded during the legendary family dinner where I announced my plans. "This is impulsive and irresponsible, Alexandra." "It's healthcare logistics," I'd tried to explain. Rural hospitals aren't your concern," my mother interrupted. "Your career is. Your future is. Do you have any idea what your father and I sacrificed for your education?" Rebecca, already an associate at her investment firm, had smiled that superior smile. "Not everyone is cut out for the corporate climb, Mom. Some people need to find themselves." The condescension in her voice made it clear. She thought I was running away from hard work, not running toward a vision they couldn't see. Only Grandma Lee supported me, quietly transferring $50,000 from her modest savings. "For your dream?" the note said. "No one can build it but you." That money kept MedConnect alive during our first year while I built prototypes and Zara joined as co-founder. We lived on ramen and hope, working from my apartment because we couldn't afford office space. When Grandma Lee passed away 2 years ago, the jade pendant wasn't all she left me. Her will included another $100,000 with specific instructions. For Alexandria's company, because she sees what others cannot. That investment carried us through to our seed round. Every milestone since has been built on her belief in me. Every hospital we serve honors her memory. I've never told my family about Grandma Lee's investment. They assume I've been struggling, barely keeping my hobby afloat. The truth would require explaining why she believed in me when they didn't. Why she saw value in my vision when they saw only risk and irresponsibility. These memories tumbled through my mind as I sat in the MedConnect conference room that Wednesday, the day before our final investor pitch. Zara was running through our presentation while our executive team offered feedback. Tomorrow, we would secure the $12 million that would transform everything. For our company, for rural healthcare, and for my family's perception of me. My phone lit up with a text from Rebecca. "Bridesmaid dress arrived. Fitting on Saturday at 10 a.m. Don't be late." Then another. "Dad mentioned maybe helping you with the $300 if you're still short. Let me know." The assumption that I needed financial help from our father stung more than it should have. I'd built a company from nothing, secured millions in funding, created technology that saved lives, and they still saw me as needing a handout for a $300 dress. "Alex, you with us?" Zara's voice pulled me back. "Sorry, distracted," I admitted. "Wedding drama?" she asked knowingly. I nodded, putting my phone away. Nothing important. Tomorrow's the big day, our CFO said, gathering his papers. After the Morgan meeting, everything changes. He had no idea how right he was. For 4 years, I'd compartmentalized my life. Professional success hidden from my family. Personal humiliations hidden from my team. Tomorrow would begin the collapse of those walls. One last rehearsal, Zara said, from the top. I straightened my shoulders and began the pitch I'd refined over 4 years of rejection, doubt, and perseverance. Rural hospitals face systematic disadvantages in medical supply chains that directly impact patient outcomes. MedConnect isn't just software. It's healthcare equality delivered through logistics. The words flowed easily now, backed by data, customer testimonials, and growing revenue. This wasn't a fantasy or a hobby. It was a mission that had consumed 20,000 hours of my life, fueled by a promise made at my grandmother's hospital bedside. After the team dispersed, I stayed late, refining slides and practicing answers to potential investor questions. My phone buzzed again. Rebecca had created a group chat with all bridesmaids about the schedule for her wedding weekend. Reminder, rehearsal dinner. Friday, black cocktail attire, ceremony. Saturday at 4 p.m., reception to follow. Sunday brunch for close family and wedding. Party. No exceptions or late arrivals. I added the events to my calendar, noting that our funding announcement was scheduled for Friday morning. The timing couldn't have been better, or worse, depending on perspective. Either way, by the time I arrived at Rebecca's rehearsal dinner, my family would be the last to know about MedConnect's success. Perhaps that was fitting. They had been the last to believe it was possible. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that comes before pivotal moments. I dressed with unusual care, a charcoal suit I'd splurged on last month but kept hidden in the back of my closet, a silk blouse in Grandma Lee's favorite shade of teal. The jade pendant completed the outfit, visible for once instead of tucked. Away! Today would determine everything we'd worked for. You look like a CEO, Zara commented when I arrived at the office, where our team was assembling for final preparations before the investor meeting. Finally dressing for the job you already have. Thought it was time, I replied with a smile. Our presentation was scheduled for 2 p.m. at Morgan's downtown office. As we rehearsed one last time, I felt a strange calm. We were ready. Our product worked. Our numbers were solid. Our vision was clear. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Alexandra, please call ASAP. Issues with wedding schedule. Rebecca is very upset. I silenced the phone. Whatever wedding drama was unfolding could wait until after the most important meeting of my professional life. At 1:30, our executive team, Zara, our CFO, our CTO, and I, headed to Morgan's office in the financial district. The sleek building, with its glass and steel facade, couldn't have been more different from our converted factory space. Remember when we practiced pitching in your apartment with presentation slides taped to your refrigerator? Zara whispered as we rode the elevator to the 32nd floor. And when we celebrated our first hospital signing with grocery store champagne? I added. Those early days had been brutally hard. For every step forward, we faced 3 new obstacles. Our first prototype failed spectacularly during a demo. Our initial pitch deck was rejected by 27 investors. Our first hire quit after 2 weeks for a safer position, but we persisted. When the code failed, we rebuilt it. When investors said no, we improved and kept asking. When team members left, we found people who believed in the mission. Through it all, I maintained the facade for my family. The struggling entrepreneur whose app thing was merely a phase before accepting the real job they kept trying to arrange for me. It was easier than fighting their perceptions. Easier than explaining why this mattered so much. Morgan Hayes greeted us personally in the conference room, her firm's partners and investment analysts already seated around the polished table. The MedConnect team, she announced. I've been following their progress for 2 years. What they've accomplished deserves our attention. I took a deep breath and began our presentation. The words flowed easily now, backed by metrics that spoke for themselves. 5 rural hospitals currently using our system, 3 more launching next month. 40% improvement in critical supply availability. 28% reduction in emergency transfers due to supply shortages. Growth projections that showed exactly how their investment would scale our impact. What makes MedConnect different, I concluded, isn't just our technology. It's our understanding of the actual problems rural healthcare providers face. We didn't build this from theory. We built it from hospital hallways, from real shortages, from real patients, whose outcomes improved because supplies arrived when needed. I didn't mention Grandma Lee specifically, but her presence filled my words. This wasn't just business. It was personal. The questions came rapid fire after the presentation. Market size, competitive analysis, regulatory hurdles, scalability concerns. Our team fielded each one confidently, the result of 4 years living and breathing every aspect of the business. Your burn rate is remarkably efficient, one partner noted, reviewing our financials. Most startups at your stage would have spent twice as much to achieve these results. We've been careful with our resources, our CFO explained. Necessity drove innovation in our approach. What he didn't say was how I'd lived on ramen for a year, how Zara and I had shared a 1-bedroom apartment to save on rent, how we'd bartered services with other startups to avoid cash expenditures, how we'd stretched Grandma Lee's investment until it yielded results no one thought possible. Morgan pulled me aside after the formal meeting concluded, and the partners moved to a private room to discuss. "You've built something remarkable, Alex," she said. "Not just the technology, the team, the culture, the mission." "Thank you for believing in us when others didn't," I replied. "Sometimes the best investments are in the visions others can't see yet." She smiled knowingly. "Your family still doesn't understand what you've built, do they?" I shook my head, surprised by her perception. "Mine didn't either at first," she continued. "My father wanted me to be a doctor like him. When I chose venture capital, he called it glorified gambling. It took years for him to see what I was building." Her words resonated more than she could know. The parallel to my own experience was uncanny. "The partners are ready," her assistant announced, interrupting our moment of connection. We rejoined the group in the main conference room. The energy had shifted noticeably. MedConnect represents exactly the kind of innovation our fund was created to support, Morgan began. Healthcare technology with demonstrable impact, led by founders who combine technical expertise with authentic connection to the problems they're solving. She paused, looking around the table. The other partners nodded in agreement. "We're prepared to lead your Series A round at a $12 million valuation, with the full $5 million you've requested." The words hung in the air for a moment before reality sank in. We'd done it. 4 years of work, doubt, and perseverance had led to this moment. "The paperwork will be finalized tomorrow," Morgan continued. "We'd like to announce the funding Monday morning, unless you have timing preferences." I thought of Rebecca's wedding schedule. The rehearsal dinner tomorrow. The ceremony Saturday. The timing couldn't have been more perfect, or more complicated. "Actually, would it be possible to move the announcement to tomorrow morning?" I asked. "We have some strategic reasons for preferring that timing." Morgan raised an eyebrow, but nodded. "We can make that work. Press release goes out at 9 a.m. then?" "Perfect," I said, ignoring the questioning look from Zara. As we gathered our materials to leave, my phone buzzed again with multiple texts from my family. "Rebecca, where are you? You missed the bridesmaid call. Critical wedding details." "Mom, Alexandra, this behavior is unacceptable. Call immediately." "Dad, your mother is very upset. Whatever work emergency you think you're handling can wait. Family comes first." The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, they'd dismissed my work as unimportant And now they expected me to drop everything for wedding details that could easily be texted. "Everything okay?" Zara asked as we left the building. "Just wedding drama," I replied. "Nothing that can't wait until we celebrate this moment." We gathered our team back at the office to share the news. Cheers erupted as I announced the successful funding round. 4 years of sacrifice had finally paid off. We'd secured the capital needed to expand to 50 hospitals within 18 months, potentially affecting outcomes for thousands of patients. "Tomorrow, at 9 a.m. it becomes official," I told them, "and everything changes." Little did they know how true that was, not just for MedConnect, but for my family's perception of me. After tomorrow's announcement, I would never again be the struggling, impractical dreamer they'd dismissed for so long. As I finally called my mother back that evening to address the wedding emergency, a seating chart crisis that could have been resolved with a simple text, I savored the private knowledge that by this time tomorrow, the power dynamic that had shaped our relationship for years would be forever altered. Sometimes vindication comes in the form of a press release. Friday. Morning arrived with a flurry of activity. Our PR team had worked through the night finalizing the funding announcement with Morgan's people. The press release was scheduled to go out at 9 a.m. sharp, followed by carefully coordinated social media posts and emails to our network. TechCrunch and several healthcare industry publications had already scheduled interviews for later that day. I arrived at the office at 7 a.m., earlier than usual, my stomach a knot of anticipation. The bridesmaid dress for Rebecca's wedding hung in its garment bag in my car. I'd need to drive straight from the office to the vineyard where the rehearsal dinner was being held at 6 p.m. "Today's the day," Zara said, handing me a coffee as I settled at my desk. "How does it feel to finally let the world know what we've built?" "Surreal," I admitted. 4 years of keeping our progress quiet, and in 2 hours everyone will know. "Everyone except your family," she pointed out. "They'll find out with everyone else unless you tell them first." Her words hit a nerve. I hadn't planned to give my family any advance notice about the announcement. After years of dismissal, there was a certain satisfaction in letting them discover my success alongside the rest of the world. But was that satisfaction worth the potential fallout? Maybe I should call them, I said, suddenly uncertain. "Give them a heads up before the news breaks." Zara studied me for a moment. "Why? So they can downplay it? Tell you not to get your hopes up? Remind you that startups fail all the time?" She wasn't wrong. That was exactly how they'd respond. Every milestone we'd hit had been met with the same tepid acknowledgement followed by reminders of how risky startups were. Every small success undercut with suggestions for backup plans. "They're your family, Alex," Zara continued, her tone softening. "But they've never believed in what we're doing. Maybe it's time they learn the truth like everyone else." My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Final bridesmaid instructions for tonight. Arrive by 5:30 for photos. Wear hair up with provided. Accessories only. No personal jewelry. The focus needs to be uniform and on ME, not individual style choices." The directive about jewelry reminded me of the jade pendant from Grandma Lee, the only person in my family who had believed in me. I touched it reflexively, tucked beneath my blouse as always. Another text arrived from my mother. "Dad spoke with William Blackwell yesterday. The associate position at his firm is still available if you're ready to be sensible. We can discuss tonight at the rehearsal dinner." The audacity of it, still pushing their agenda even on the eve of the funding announcement that would validate everything they'd dismissed. But they didn't know about the announcement. Couldn't know how dramatically my circumstances were about to change. My finger hovered over the call button next to my mother's name. Should I tell them? Give them one last chance to acknowledge my path before the public validation made their approval irrelevant? Before I could decide, our PR lead rushed into my office. "We have a problem." My heart sank. What kind of problem? "Someone," leaked the funding news early. TechCrunch just published a preliminary report mentioning the $12 million valuation. The full announcement is rushing to go live now, but it's already spreading on Twitter. I quickly pulled up TechCrunch on my laptop. Sure enough, there it was. Healthcare logistics startup MedConnect secures $5 million Series A at $12 million valuation. The article was brief but mentioned me by name as founder and CEO. How did this happen? I asked, though it hardly mattered now. Unclear. But it's moving fast. Your LinkedIn profile is blowing up with congratulations. My phone began buzzing with notifications. Industry contacts, former colleagues, distant connections all reacting to the news. Only my family remained silent. Either they hadn't seen it yet, or they were processing what it meant. The quiet before the storm. At 8:45, 15 minutes before our planned announcement, my phone rang. Rebecca. I considered letting it go to voicemail but decided this conversation was inevitable. Better to have it now than at the rehearsal dinner. Hello? What is this? Her voice was tight with controlled fury. Timothy just showed me some tech article about you getting millions in funding. Is this a joke? The moment of truth had arrived sooner than expected. It's not a joke, Rebecca. MedConnect closed our Series A round yesterday. The formal announcement is going out in 15 minutes. $12 million? She sounded both incredulous and accusatory, as if I'd committed some kind of fraud. That's what this article is claiming your company is worth? That's the valuation, yes. A long silence followed. I could almost hear her recalibrating, adjusting her understanding of our power dynamic. Why didn't you tell us? She finally asked, her tone shifting from anger to something more complex. All this time you've let us think that I was struggling? That my company was a hobby? That I needed your fiancé's father to save me with an entry-level job? The bitterness I'd suppressed for years seeped into my voice. You never asked, Rebecca. None of you did. You decided what I was doing wasn't valuable, wasn't worthy of your interest? That's not fair, she protested. You never shared any of this. Would you have listened if I had? Or would you have found a way to dismiss it, like every other time? I tried to explain my work. Another silence. Then, does Mom know? Dad? They're about to find out, just like everyone else. Alex, you can't. This is my wedding weekend. Do you have any idea how this looks? Like you deliberately timed this to overshadow my wedding. The accusation was so perfectly Rebecca, making my professional milestone about her personal celebration. As if I'd orchestrated our funding round to coincide with her wedding just to steal attention. The timing wasn't my choice, I said, which wasn't entirely true. I had requested the Friday announcement, but the funding round itself had been in process for months. This is business, Rebecca. It has nothing to do with your wedding. Everything has to do with my wedding this weekend, she snapped. 4 years you've been working on this thing, and it has to be announced the day of my rehearsal dinner? The day before I get married? I'll see you tonight, I said, unwilling to defend myself further. Congratulations on your wedding. I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking slightly. The confrontation I'd anticipated for weeks had finally happened, and it had gone exactly as expected. Rebecca making my success about her, casting herself as the victim of my achievement. My phone immediately buzzed with texts from my parents. Mom. What is going on? Rebecca just called hysterical about some business announcement? Dad. Call immediately. Family situation requires discussion before any public statements. They still didn't get it. The announcement wasn't pending. It was happening. The world already knew what my family had refused to see. At 9 a.m. sharp, our official press release went live. My phone exploded with congratulations from industry contacts, former classmates, distant connections suddenly eager to reconnect. Our office filled with the team's excited chatter as our social media metrics skyrocketed. In the midst of it all, I sat in my office, jade pendant now visible outside my blouse, feeling an unexpected wave of emotion. Relief, vindication, but also a strange sadness. Today should have been a moment of unmitigated triumph, the validation of 4 years of work and sacrifice. Instead, it was tangled with family drama, with Rebecca's accusations, with the knowledge that tonight's rehearsal dinner would now be tense and complicated. "You okay?" Zara asked, appearing in my doorway with a bottle of champagne. "This is supposed to be our celebration day," I nodded, pushing aside the complicated feelings. "It is, and we've earned it." As the team gathered for a toast, I pushed thoughts of my family aside. This moment belonged to all of us who had believed in MedConnect when others hadn't, who had seen the vision when others couldn't. The rehearsal dinner, and whatever family, confrontation awaited me there, could wait a few hours. This morning, at least, was for celebrating what we'd built. Sometimes the moments we've worked hardest for arrive complicated by the very relationships that should make them sweeter. The drive to Meadowbrook Vineyard for Rebecca's rehearsal dinner should have taken 45 minutes. With Boston Friday traffic, it took nearly 2 hours. I welcomed the delay. Each mile put distance between the celebratory atmosphere of the MedConnect office and the confrontation awaiting me. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since the announcement. Industry congratulations. College classmates suddenly remembering our connection. LinkedIn requests from people I'd never met. And buried among them, increasingly urgent messages from my family. "Dad, we need to speak before you arrive tonight. Call immediately." "Mom, Alexandra, why wouldn't you share this with us? Rebecca is devastated by your timing. I hadn't returned." Their calls. What could I say that would make any difference now? 4 years of dismissing my work couldn't be undone with a single conversation. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the vineyard's rolling hills as I pulled into the gravel parking area. The venue was undeniably beautiful. Manicured gardens, a renovated barn strung with twinkling lights, and rows of grapevines stretching toward the horizon. Exactly the kind of picturesque setting Rebecca would choose. I checked my appearance in the rearview mirror. The bridesmaid dress, an unflattering shade of mauve that had surely been selected to complement Rebecca's complexion at the expense of everyone else's, fit perfectly, despite her suggestions that I hit the gym before the fitting. My hair was arranged in the specified updo, but I'd made one small act of rebellion. Grandma Lee's jade pendant remained visible around my neck. After today, I was done hiding who I was and what I had built. The wedding planner intercepted me before I could enter the barn. "Alexandria Chen, you're 30 minutes late. The bridal party photos have already started." "Traffic," I explained simply. She gave me a look that suggested she didn't believe me. "Rebecca has been asking for you. You should head straight to the vineyard terrace." I could feel eyes on me as I walked through the venue. Timothy's family, friends, Rebecca's college sorority sisters, colleagues from her investment firm, people who this morning had viewed me as Rebecca's struggling little sister, but who now whispered as I passed. News traveled fast in Boston's connected circles. "There she is," I heard someone murmur. "The sister with the tech company. 12 million, another voice added. Announced today of all days." I kept walking, chin up, jade pendant catching the fading sunlight. Rebecca stood with her bridesmaids on the terrace, a photographer capturing posed shots with the vineyard as backdrop. Her expression when she saw me was complicated, a flash of genuine anger quickly masked with a camera-ready smile. "Alex, finally!" Her voice carried just the right note of sisterly affection for the photographer's benefit. "Come join us for the last few shots." I took my place in the arrangement of identically dressed women, holding the practiced smile I'd perfected over years of family gatherings. The one that revealed nothing of what I was actually feeling. "Beautiful ladies," the photographer called. "Now just the sisters, please." The other bridesmaids stepped away, leaving Rebecca and me alone in the frame. She gripped my arm, smile never faltering. "We'll discuss this later," she hissed through her teeth. "How could you do this to me?" "Do what exactly?" I kept my voice low, still smiling. "Succeed? Build something valuable? Sorry if my timing was inconvenient for your narrative about me." "Perfect," the photographer called. "Now show me that sisterly love." Rebecca put her arm around my shoulders, pulling me close. To anyone watching, we looked like loving sisters sharing a special moment before a wedding. Only we knew the tension, vibrating between us. "You deliberately chose my wedding weekend," she whispered. 4 years of working on this, and suddenly it has to be announced now? Believe it or not, Rebecca, the timing of my Series A funding round wasn't planned around your wedding schedule. The business world doesn't revolve around your special day. Ladies, can we get just a touch more genuine warmth? The photographer called. We both broadened our smiles, a perfect performance of sisterly affection. "Mom and Dad are beside themselves," Rebecca continued through her smile. "Dad had to explain to William Blackwell why he didn't know about your company's valuation when William saw it on Bloomberg this afternoon. I hadn't considered that angle, my father's embarrassment at being caught unaware about his own daughter's success. The thought gave me a small flicker of satisfaction. Then, maybe they should have actually listened when I tried to tell them about my work," I replied, as the photographer continued clicking away. "Instead of arranging job interviews, I never asked for. They were trying to help you. They were trying to fix me. There's a difference." The photographer finally released us, and Rebecca immediately stepped away, the sisterly facade dropping like a discarded mask. "We're starting dinner in 20 minutes, she said coolly. "Try not to make this night about you two." She walked away to join Timothy and his parents, who were watching our interaction with obvious curiosity. I stood alone on the terrace for a moment, gathering myself. This was only the beginning of what promised to be a tense weekend. "Alex." I turned to find my father standing behind me, my mother at his side. They'd clearly been waiting for their opportunity to speak with me privately. "Congratulations on your funding announcement," my father said stiffly, as if reading from a script. "We're very proud of what you've accomplished." Words that should have meant everything to me years ago now rang hollow. Too little. Too late. "Thank you," I replied, equally formal. "Why didn't you tell us?" My mother's voice cracked slightly, genuine hurt visible beneath her perfect makeup. "All this time you let us think you were struggling." "Would you have believed me if I had told you?" I asked quietly. "Or would you have found a way to diminish it like always? Startups fail all the time, Alexandra." "Don't get your hopes up, Alexandra. Have a backup plan, Alexandra." My father's expression tightened. "We were concerned. As parents, it's our job to support my choices," I interrupted. "To trust my judgment? To actually listen when I tried to explain what I was building." "That's not fair," my mother protested. "We've always supported you." "No." I shook my head. "You've always tolerated me, waiting for me to fail so I'd finally take the path you prescribed. Grandma Lee supported me. She actually believed in me." At the mention of Grandma Lee, something shifted in my father's expression. A flash of understanding, quickly suppressed. "The initial investment," he said. "It was from my mother, wasn't it? The money she left you." I nodded. "She saw value in my vision when none of you did." A complicated emotion crossed his face. Regret, perhaps, or recognition of a missed opportunity to connect with his daughter. Whatever it was, it disappeared behind his usual composed expression. "Well," he straightened his tie, retreating to familiar formality. "We should join the others. Rebecca needs this evening to proceed as planned." The slight emphasis on my sister's name was clear. This was her weekend, not mine. My success should be muted, downplayed, mentioned only in passing, if at all. Of course, I replied, falling back into the familiar pattern of managing family expectations. It's her special day. But as we walked toward the barn where dinner was being set up, I realized something had fundamentally changed. For the first time, I was entering a family gathering not as the disappointing daughter, but as someone who had proven her own worth, on her own terms. The power dynamic had shifted. They might not fully acknowledge it yet, but they felt it. I felt it. And judging by the curious glances from the other guests, everyone else felt it too. Sometimes the most powerful moment isn't the public announcement, but the private recognition that follows, when those who dismissed you must finally see you, as you truly are. The rehearsal dinner was a masterclass in New England high society performative politeness. Long tables arranged in the renovated barn, adorned with elaborate floral centerpieces and fine china. String lights cast a warm glow over the assembled guests, while servers circulated with trays of locally sourced appetizers and wine from the vineyard's own collection. I found my seat at the secondary family table, not at the main table with Rebecca, Timothy, and their parents, but close enough to maintain the appearance of family unity. My place card sat between my mother's college roommate and a distant cousin. Far enough from Rebecca to prevent any potentially awkward conversations, I assumed, but seating arrangements couldn't prevent the undercurrent of whispers that followed me. The funding announcement had traveled through Boston's interconnected social circles with remarkable speed. Timothy's family moved in financial circles where a $12 million valuation was noteworthy. More than once, I caught curious glances from his father's colleagues, the same men who'd barely acknowledged my existence at previous family gatherings. Alexandra, isn't it? The silver-haired man across the table extended his hand. James, Whitley, Keystone Ventures. Saw the news about MedConnect today. Impressive round for a healthcare logistics play. Thank you, I replied, shaking his hand. We're excited about the expansion possibilities. Morgan Hayes has a good eye for healthcare tech. If she's backing you, there must be something substantial. There. I'd love to hear more about your rural hospital focus. Before I could respond, my mother appeared beside me, champagne glass in hand, smile fixed in place. James, lovely to see you again. I see you've met my daughter. Alexandra, sweetheart, I believe Rebecca was looking for you. Something about the procession tomorrow. Her interruption was smooth but pointed. The message was clear. This isn't the time for business networking. Of course, I smiled politely at James. Perhaps we could connect after the wedding weekend. As my mother steered me away from the table, her grip on my arm tightened. Alexandra, please. This is Rebecca's night. Your father and I are very proud of your accomplishment, but this isn't the appropriate setting to discuss business. He approached me, Mom, I pointed out. What exactly would you like me to do? Pretend the announcement didn't happen? Deflect every congratulations or question? She sighed, the kind of long-suffering sigh she'd perfected over years of what she perceived as my difficult behavior. Just keep it minimal. Timothy's family is very traditional about these things. Business. Talk at social functions is considered gauche. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, Rebecca had dominated family gatherings with detailed accounts of her promotions, deals, and networking victories. My father regularly discussed hospital politics and board maneuvers over holiday dinners. But my business success needed to be downplayed as inappropriate. I'll do my best, I replied neutrally, knowing this wasn't a battle worth fighting tonight. As dinner progressed, I caught snippets of conversation from nearby tables. Announced right before the wedding weekend. Seems calculated, doesn't it? Always. Been competitive between those sisters, $12 million. And no one in the family even knew. The assumptions about my motives stung, but I maintained the pleasant expression I'd perfected at countless family gatherings. Inside, though, a quiet anger simmered. How quickly they ascribed the worst intentions to my timing, as if I'd orchestrated a business milestone specifically to undermine my sister. Midway through the main course, the traditional speeches began. Timothy's father spoke about the joining of two exceptional families. My father discussed his pride in Rebecca's accomplishments and welcomed Timothy into our family. Photos of Rebecca's childhood and academic achievements flashed on a screen, each one accompanied by anecdotes of her early promise and meteoric rise. Not a single mention of me beyond being identified as Rebecca's sister in a few family photos. It was as if my achievement earlier that day simply hadn't happened, or worse, was being deliberately erased to maintain the established narrative. As coffee and dessert were served, Rebecca circulated among the tables, the perfect bride-to-be, graciously acknowledging congratulations. When she reached my table, her smile remained intact, but her eyes held a warning. "Alex, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." Her voice carried just the right note of sisterly affection. "Come say hello to the Michelsons. They just flew in from London." I followed her to a nearby table where an older couple greeted us warmly. "Rebecca has told us so much about you," Mrs. Michelson said. "All good things, I hope," I replied with the expected pleasantry. "She mentioned you work in technology? Something with hospitals?" Before I could answer, Rebecca interjected smoothly. "Alex has always been our family's creative thinker, always marching to her own drummer." Her laugh tinkled like glass. "But enough about work. Did Rebecca tell you about our family's summer tradition at the Cape?" The swift redirection was skillful, and to anyone watching, would have appeared perfectly natural. But the message to me was unmistakable. My narrative was still being controlled, my success minimized. As Rebecca led the conversation, I felt my phone vibrate in my clutch. Excusing myself to use the restroom, I checked the notification. A message. From Zara with a link to TechCrunch's feature article about our funding announcement, now the site's most read story of the day. The contrast between my two worlds had never been starker. In one, I was the founder and CEO who had just secured a $12 million valuation for a company changing rural healthcare. In the other, I was still creative Alex, who needed to be managed and redirected in social situations. When I returned to the main room, I found Timothy's father engaged in conversation with James Whitley and several other men I recognized from Boston's venture capital scene. Their eyes tracked me as I walked past, their interest obvious. In their world, the world of business and investment, what I'd accomplished merited attention. Rebecca intercepted me before I could return to my table. "The cake tasting is at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Don't be late." Her voice was light, her smile in place, but her eyes were hard. "And Alex? I've noticed several of Timothy's family friends trying to discuss business with you. I'd appreciate it if you could redirect those conversations. This weekend isn't about MedConnect." The dismissal in her tone, that familiar note I'd heard for years when she referenced my little app, ignited something in me. After 4 years of downplaying my work for my family's comfort, of accepting their narrative about my choices, something broke. "You're right, Rebecca," I said calmly. "This weekend isn't about MedConnect. It's about your wedding. But my company's valuation isn't something I orchestrated to compete with you. It's the result of 4 years of work that you and everyone else in this family dismissed as a hobby." Her smile faltered slightly. "That's not fair. We were concerned. About you?" "No." I shook my head. "You were embarrassed by me. There's a difference." For a moment, I glimpsed something vulnerable in her expression, perhaps recognition of the truth in my words. But it vanished quickly, replaced by the polished facade that had become her default. "Just please keep the business talk to a minimum," she said, already turning away. "For me? As a wedding gift?" As she rejoined Timothy at the main table, I realized something fundamental had shifted. For the first time, Rebecca had asked, not commanded, not assumed, but asked, for my cooperation. The power balance between us had changed in ways neither of us had fully processed yet. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of dessert, toasts, and carefully navigated conversations. Through it all, I maintained the poised exterior expected of me while my thoughts raced ahead to tomorrow, the wedding day itself, when the full impact of my changed status within the family would become even more apparent. Sometimes the greatest opposition comes not when you're failing, but when you're finally succeeding on your own terms. Saturday morning dawned clear and perfect, exactly the weather a bride would order if such things were possible. I woke early in my hotel room, my phone already buzzing with notifications. The funding announcement had continued to spread overnight, with several industry publications picking up the story. My LinkedIn profile had gained over 1,000 new connections. 3 different podcast hosts had reached out for interviews. But more immediately pressing was the text from Rebecca's maid of honor. Breakfast with bride, hotel restaurant, 8 a.m. sharp, mandatory, all caps. As if I might somehow forget my sister's wedding day. I dressed in the required bridesmaid prep outfit, matching silk robes in Rebecca's chosen shade of blush pink, to be worn for the getting ready photo shoot. The jade pendant remained around my neck. Some boundaries were no longer negotiable. The hotel restaurant had been partially closed off for the bridal party breakfast. Rebecca sat at the center of the table, already in her monogrammed robe, holding court as her closest friends, hung on her every word. Her smile tightened slightly when she saw me. Alex. Finally. We were just discussing the procession order. Her tone was bright for the benefit of others, but I caught the subtle warning in her eyes. Today was to proceed exactly as she had planned, without deviation. I took the only empty seat, beside Rebecca's college roommate Megan, the one who'd replaced me as maid of honor because she could actually afford the bachelorette weekend. Congratulations on your funding round, Megan whispered as Rebecca continued detailing the day's schedule to the group. 12 million is impressive. Thank you, I replied, surprised by her genuine tone. I work in healthcare investment at Wellington, she added. Your rural hospital focus is fascinating. I'd love to hear more about it sometime. Before I could respond, Rebecca clinked her mimosa glass. Ladies, a toast to the most perfect day with my favorite people. Glasses raised around the table. The sophisticated brunch continued with discussion of hair appointments, the florist's timeline, and the wedding hashtag. Superficial conversation that deliberately avoided any mention of my company's news. After breakfast, we moved to the hotel's bridal suite where a team of stylists waited to transform us into Rebecca's perfect vision. As the makeup artist worked on me, I checked my phone to find a message from Zara. Boston Business Journal wants to feature you in their Women in Tech issue. Cover story potential. Also, you're trending on Twitter. No phones, Rebecca called from across the room. I want everyone fully present for this special day. I silenced my phone and slipped it into my bag, catching a glimpse of Rebecca watching me with narrowed eyes. The old Alex would have apologized, would have done anything to smooth over the moment. The new Alex simply met her gaze without flinching. Getting ready photo shoot proceeded with military precision. Matching robes, choreographed laughter, posed shots of bridesmaids helping Rebecca with her jewelry. The photographer directed us through a series of setups designed to appear spontaneous and joyful. Now just the family, the photographer called. Mother of the bride, father of the bride, and sister of the bride with Rebecca. My parents flanked Rebecca, their faces glowing with pride. I stood slightly apart, still connected but not quite part of their unit. The photographer frowned. Ay, little closer, please. Sister, right next to the bride. As I moved closer, Rebecca whispered without moving her lips. The jade pendant. Can you tuck it in? It's not part of the aesthetic. 4 years ago, I would have complied immediately. Even yesterday, I might have considered it. Today, I simply smiled for the camera, pendant clearly visible. Perfect, the photographer called. Now show me that sisterly love. Rebecca's arm circled my waist, her grip slightly too tight to be affectionate. I maintained my smile, remembering her words from weeks ago. "You can't afford a decent dress for my wedding, let alone the bridesmaid fee." The getting ready festivities continued for hours. Hair, makeup, dressing, more photos. Through it all, I played my assigned role perfectly while remaining quietly aware of my phone vibrating occasionally in my bag. My other world, my real world, continuing to respond to yesterday's announcement. As afternoon approached, we were transported to the ceremony venue, an elegant stone chapel adjacent to the vineyard. The wedding planner arranged us in the vestibule, reviewing the procession order one final time. "Remember, slow steps, smile naturally. This is being filmed for the wedding video," she instructed us. Through the chapel doors, I could see the assembled guests: Boston's elite, Timothy's finance, connections, Rebecca's college friends, our extended family. Nearly 300 people gathered to witness Rebecca's perfect day. As the music began and bridesmaids started their procession one by one, my father appeared beside me, ready to walk Rebecca down the aisle after I made my entrance. "You look beautiful, Alexandra," he said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "Thank you, Dad." He hesitated, then added, "Your grandmother would be proud of you, not just for yesterday's announcement, for your persistence all these years when—" He trailed off. "When you and Mom didn't believe in me?" I finished quietly. He didn't deny it. We were wrong, about many things. Before I could respond, the wedding planner signaled my turn to walk. I squeezed my father's hand once, then began my procession down the aisle. As I walked, I noticed something unexpected. The guests weren't just watching for the bride to appear. Many eyes were fixed on me. Whispers rippled through the crowd. The news of MedConnect's valuation had clearly spread throughout the wedding guests. I held my head high, jade pendant catching the light streaming through stained glass windows. With each step, I felt Grandma Lee's presence, her belief in me that had sustained me when my immediate families had faltered. Taking my place at the altar, I turned to watch Rebecca make her entrance. She was objectively stunning in her designer gown, our father proud beside her. The perfect bride in her perfect setting with her perfect future laid out before her. But for the first time in our lives, she wasn't the only Chen daughter commanding attention. The power dynamic had shifted, subtly but unmistakably. I could feel it in the glances from guests, in the way Timothy's father nodded respectfully in my direction, in the almost imperceptible change in my mother's expression as she watched me from the front row. For years, success in our family had one acceptable appearance: prestigious degrees, corporate advancement, marrying well. Rebecca had followed that template flawlessly. I had charted my own course, enduring their dismissal and doubt along the way. Now both paths stood validated before 300 witnesses. Both sisters successful, but on entirely different terms. As the ceremony proceeded, I maintained my bridesmaid smile while my thoughts drifted to Monday's scheduled hospital site visit, to the team waiting to implement our expansion plans, to the patients who would benefit from our improved supply chain. My success wasn't just about proving my family wrong. It was about the actual impact of the work they'd dismissed for so long. That knowledge gave me a quiet confidence that no family, approval or disapproval, could touch. When the minister finally pronounced Rebecca and Timothy husband and wife, applause filled the chapel. The newlyweds beamed as they processed back down the aisle, the picture of societal success. As I followed in the recessional, I caught James Whitley from Keystone Ventures watching me with obvious interest. Several of Timothy's finance colleagues nodded in my direction with new respect. A venture capitalist I recognized from industry events actually winked. In the space of 24 hours, I had transformed from Rebecca's struggling sister to a CEO with a multi-million-dollar valuation. The wedding hadn't changed, but the context surrounding it had shifted dramatically. Sometimes vindication comes not in dramatic confrontations, but in the subtle shift of perception. In the moment when others finally see what you've known about, Yourself all along. The wedding reception was held in the vineyard's grand pavilion, a glass-walled structure offering panoramic views of the estate. Crystal chandeliers hung from exposed wooden beams, casting a warm glow over white-clothed tables. Adorned with elaborate floral arrangements, a string quartet played softly as guests mingled during cocktail hour. I stood with the other bridesmaids, dutifully holding a champagne flute and smiling for photos. But the dynamic had shifted noticeably. Where yesterday I had been largely ignored, at the rehearsal dinner today people sought me out. Alexandra Chen? James Whitley mentioned you yesterday. I'm Patricia Lowell, Meridian Healthcare Partners. A sharp-eyed woman in her 50s extended her hand. Your rural hospital focus is intriguing. We should talk. Before I could respond, another guest approached. Alex Chen, Richard Donovan, Boston Venture Group. Congratulations on your Series A. Morgan Hayes has an excellent track record. Each interaction followed a similar pattern. Congratulations on the funding, interest in MedConnect's model, business cards discreetly passed, all happening at my sister's wedding reception, where just weeks ago she had deemed me too financially unstable to be her maid of honor. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, Rebecca had leveraged family events to network and advance her career. Now that the tables had turned, I could sense her growing discomfort from across the room as she watched business contacts approach me rather than her. Quite the transformation in one day, a familiar voice observed. I turned to find Timothy's father, William Blackwell, champagne in hand. His expression was difficult to read, somewhere between impressed and calculating. Mr. Blackwell. I nodded politely. That associate position we discussed is clearly no longer appropriate, he said with a thin smile. Though I must say, I'm curious why you never mentioned your company's progress during our previous conversations. I met his gaze steadily. Would you have believed me without yesterday's announcement? Or would you have assumed I was exaggerating like my family did? He chuckled, a sound without much warmth. Fair point. We all have our blind spots, especially when it comes to family. He sipped his champagne. Well, congratulations. 12 million is respectable for a healthcare logistics play. If you're considering a Series B in the future, Blackwell Strategies has a healthcare innovation fund that might be interested. I'll keep that in mind, I replied, recognizing the olive branch for what it was. Not an apology for underestimating me, but a businessman's pragmatic adjustment to new information. As dinner commenced, I found myself seated at a table with distant relatives and Timothy's work colleagues, still not at the family table, per Rebecca's original seating chart. But the conversation around me was markedly different from any previous family gathering. People asked questions about MedConnect. They listened to my answers. They engaged with my ideas. My phone vibrated in my clutch. A text from Zara. Forbes interview confirmed for Tuesday. Also, hospital in Kentucky reached out. They've seen the announcement and want to implement our system ASAP. I smiled as I tucked the phone away. The momentum was building exactly as we'd hoped. Across the room, my parents sat at the main table, occasionally glancing in my direction. My mother's expression was complicated. Pride mingled with something that might have been regret. My father's gaze held a new respect that I'd never seen before. The traditional parent dances began. Timothy and his mother. Then Rebecca and our father. I watched my sister glide across the dance floor, the perfect bride in her element. For so long, her path had been held up as the template I should follow. Corporate success, strategic marriage, adherence to social expectations. Yet here I stood, successful on entirely different terms, building rather than joining, creating rather than conforming. And now, the DJ announced, the bride would like to invite her sister Alexandria to join her for a special dance. This wasn't on the schedule. Rebecca hadn't mentioned any sister dance during the extensive planning meetings. I made my way to the dance floor, curious and slightly wary. Rebecca met me in the center, perfect smile in place for the photographers documenting every moment. The music began, Wind Beneath My Wings, a song our grandmother used to play, Grandma Lee's favorite. Rebecca said quietly as we began to move in time with the music. I thought it was appropriate. For a moment, I glimpsed the sister I'd known before competition and expectations had come between us. The Rebecca who had once taught me to ride a bike and helped me with science projects. I was wrong, she said, voice barely audible over the music. About you, about your company. The admission caught me off guard. Rebecca Chen did not acknowledge mistakes, especially not publicly. Why did you never tell us how well it was really going? She asked. Would you have believed me? I countered softly. Or would you have found a way to diminish it, like always? She didn't answer immediately, her expression suggesting she was truly considering the question. I don't know, she finally admitted, but I'm proud of you, Alex. Even if my timing for saying so is terrible. It wasn't a full apology. It didn't erase 4 years of dismissal and judgment. But in the context of our complicated relationship, it was something close to a breakthrough. Thank you, I said simply. We finished the dance in silence, each lost, in our own thoughts. As the song ended, guests applauded, cameras flashed, and we separated, returning to our distinct paths that had finally, unexpectedly, earned mutual respect. As the reception continued into the night, I found myself in a moment of quiet reflection on the vineyard's terrace, away from the music and celebration. The evening air carried the scent of roses and grapevines, a welcome respite from the perfume-heavy atmosphere inside. Mind if I join you? I turned to find my father standing in the doorway, bow tie loosened slightly, a rare concession to informality, for a man who prided himself on perfect presentation. Of course. I gestured to the empty space beside me at the stone balustrade. He came to stand next to me, both of us gazing out over the moonlit vineyard in silence for a moment. Your grandmother always said you had her spirit, he finally spoke, his voice softer than usual. Stubborn, visionary, unwilling to follow the expected path. I fingered the jade pendant at my neck. You say that like it's a compliment now. It is. He sighed, the sound carrying the weight of recognition long delayed. Though I didn't always see it that way. Another silence stretched between us, filled with years of misunderstanding and missed connections. Why didn't you tell us, Alex? He asked finally. About the real progress of your company, about what you were building. It was the same question Rebecca had asked during our dance, but coming from my father, the man whose approval I'd sought, and missed for so long, it carried different weight. I tried in the beginning, I replied honestly. Every time I shared a milestone, you or Mom would counter with concern about the failure rate of startups or suggestions for fallback plans. After a while, it seemed easier to work in silence than to defend my choices at every family dinner. He nodded slowly, absorbing my words. I'm a surgeon, Alex. I've spent my career in an environment with clear hierarchies, established protocols, proven paths to success. Your mother and I gave you girls every opportunity because we believed the right education, the right connections would secure your futures. Rebecca followed that blueprint perfectly, I observed. She did. A slight smile crossed his face. And you? You created your own blueprint. One I didn't understand. One I didn't trust. Because it didn't look like success as you defined it, I finished for him. Yes. The simple admission seemed to cost him something. My father wasn't a man who acknowledged mistakes easily. I was wrong. Those 3 words, I was wrong, hung in the night air between us, more meaningful than any elaborate apology could have been. The investors at the rehearsal dinner, the business cards being passed tonight. He gestured vaguely toward the reception. "They've made me realize something. While I was arranging interviews for jobs you never wanted, you were creating something valuable on your own terms." I felt an unexpected tightness in my chest. For so long, I'd told myself I'd moved beyond needing my father's approval. Yet hearing him acknowledge the value of my chosen path affected me more deeply than I'd anticipated. 12 million. He shook his head, a hint of wonder in his voice. "And solving a real problem in healthcare. Your grandmother would be so proud." "She was," I said quietly. "She believed in MedConnect from the beginning." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "The money she left you, that's what funded your startup," I nodded. "Her initial investment kept us afloat during our first year. Without her belief, MedConnect might never have survived long enough to prove its value." My father turned to face me fully, his expression more open than I could remember seeing it. "In years. I'm sorry, Alex, for not seeing what she saw in you, for not supporting your vision the way she did. The apology, unexpected and genuine, momentarily robbed me of words. In their absence, my father did something even more surprising. He pulled me into a hug, stiff and slightly awkward, but sincere. The first real embrace we'd shared in years. When he stepped back, he cleared his throat, clearly emotional, but working to maintain his composure. "Your mother and I would like to hear more about your company. The real details, not the polite version you've been sharing at family dinners. Perhaps brunch next weekend? At your favorite dim sum place?" The invitation represented more than a meal. It was an acknowledgement that my world was worth entering, my accomplishments worth understanding. "I'd like that," I said simply. As my father returned to the reception, I remained on the terrace a moment longer, processing what had just occurred. The relationship that had been strained for so long had begun to recalibrate, not erasing the past, but creating possibility for a different future. My phone vibrated with a text from Zara. "How's the wedding from hell going?" I smiled as I typed my response. "Actually, better than expected. Things are changing." When I rejoined the reception, I found my mother in conversation with Patricia Lowell from Meridian Healthcare. Upon seeing me, my mother's expression shifted to something I rarely witnessed: uncertainty mixed with a desire to connect. "Alexandra, Patricia was just telling me about your company's impact on rural healthcare access," she said, her tone carrying genuine interest rather than the polite acknowledgement I was accustomed to. "It sounds remarkable." "It is," Patricia confirmed. "Your daughter is addressing a critical gap in our healthcare infrastructure. You must be very proud." "Yes," my mother said, meeting my eyes directly. "We are." The simple statement, delivered, without qualification or redirection, felt like crossing a threshold. For the first time in my adult life, my mother was engaging with my work on its own terms, not as a phase to be tolerated or a risk to be managed. As the night continued, I observed subtle shifts in how my family oriented themselves around me. My father introducing me to colleagues with explicit mention of MedConnect. My mother actually listening as I explained our expansion plans to an interested guest. Rebecca including me in conversations with Timothy's business associates rather than steering me away from them. Small adjustments that signaled a larger transformation in process. Not a complete reinvention of our family dynamic, but the beginning of something more balanced, more authentic. Sometimes the most meaningful recalibrations happen not in dramatic moments, but in the quiet acknowledgement that relationships, like people, can grow into new understandings when given the chance. Sunday brunch on the vineyard's sun-drenched terrace marked the official end of Rebecca's wedding weekend. White-clothed tables dotted the space, filled with family members and close friends enjoying a final meal before departing. The newlyweds sat at the center table, Rebecca radiant in a white sundress, Timothy attentive at her side. I sipped my coffee, observing the scene with fresh eyes. For years, I'd attended family gatherings feeling slightly apart, the Chen who hadn't followed the prescribed path. Today, that separateness remained, but its meaning had transformed. No longer a mark of failure, but a recognition of different choices, different success. "Mind if I join you?" Rebecca asked, gesturing to the empty chair at my table. Without her entourage of bridesmaids or hovering in-laws, she looked younger, more like the sister I remembered from childhood. "Please," I nodded. She settled across. From me, absently adjusting her new wedding band. "So what happens next? With Med Connect, I mean." The question surprised me. Not its content, but the genuine interest behind it. For years, Rebecca had acknowledged my work only to dismiss it. Now she was asking about its future. "We expand to 50 hospitals over the next 18 months, I explained. "The Series A funding lets us hire the team we need for that scale. Eventually, we hope to create a national network that solves supply chain issues for rural healthcare nationwide." She nodded, actually listening. "And you're the CEO?" "Yes. Zara and I co-founded it, but I've led the company since the beginning." "That's impressive, Alex." The admission seemed to cost her something, but she offered it freely. "I always thought you were avoiding responsibility with this startup thing. Turns out you were taking on more than any of us realized." The simple acknowledgement healed something I hadn't realized was still wounded. "You know," she continued, "we've always been cast in these roles. Me as the successful one, you as the creative dreamer. I think we both bought into that narrative." "It was easier than fighting it," I admitted. "Maybe, but it cost us something too." She met my eyes directly. "We could have been allies instead of competitors all these years." I thought of all the family dinners where I'd kept silent about my work, all the times I'd deflected questions rather than inviting dismissal. How much of the distance between us had been created by others, and how much had I maintained myself? "Do you remember when we were kids?" Rebecca said. "And we built that treehouse in the backyard? Everyone said it would fall apart, but we designed it together. My planning, your creativity. It stood for years." I smiled at the memory. "Until that hurricane when we were in high school. We made a good team then." She hesitated. "Maybe we still could." The olive branch was unexpected but welcome. "I'd like that." As Rebecca was called away to say goodbye to departing guests, my mother took her place. "Your sister's starting to job hunt for after the honeymoon," she said. She mentioned possibly looking at healthcare-focused firms given Timothy's family. Connections. I nodded, hearing the unspoken question. MedConnect will be expanding our marketing team soon. If she's interested, I could forward the job description when it's posted. My mother's smile held surprise and something like wonder. "I think she might be. That would be nice." As I prepared to leave the brunch for my flight back to Boston, I found myself face to face with my father one last time. "Will you be at family dinner next month?" he asked. In the past, I'd dreaded these monthly gatherings. The inevitable questions about when I'd get a real job, the comparisons to Rebecca's advancement. "I will," I said, "though I might be a few minutes late. We have a hospital implementation in New Hampshire that afternoon." "We'll wait for you," he replied simply. "Your work matters." 3 words that acknowledged a transformation complete. From dismissal to respect. From judgment to understanding. As I drove away from the vineyard, the jade pendant warm against my skin, I realized Grandma Lee had been right all along. My path was different, and that difference was my strength, not my weakness. The success of MedConnect had changed how my family saw me, but more importantly, it had confirmed how I saw myself. Not as the disappointing daughter, but as someone who built something meaningful on her own terms. Sometimes the most powerful legacy isn't measured in dollars, but in the courage to believe in your vision when no one else does. and in the knowledge that eventually, if your vision is true enough, others will finally see what you saw all along. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.